The On Target Institute presents a teaching from the Men on Target small group curriculum. Now with today's session, On Target founder Vince D'Acchioli.
Hello men, and how you doing? Welcome to Men on Target Session 39. It's so good to be with you, and I want to remind you to please go to otm.co and download the handout materials for these important sessions. You'll really like the resource, and I think it'll really help you. In our last session, we finished up a man in his time. Now we're going to be talking about a man in his money, part 1. I believe, by the way, that the number one cause of financial issues in a marriage, financial difficulties, the number one cause of marriage failure. And studies have proven this as we look at marriages, that the failure to apply the right kind of ideas about money in a marriage relationship can be devastating. And what it gets into is the whole needs versus wants paradox. You know, I want certain things and I need certain things, and sometimes there's such confusion in terms of how to balance those things, it can lead to real struggle in a relationship. And it leads to what we call financial bondage. In this session, I want to go through quickly the symptoms of financial bondage, and you'll have an opportunity at the end to grade yourself and how you're doing in each of these areas. And by the way, I encourage you men to sit down with this material and do it with your spouse and ask yourself honestly as a family, how are you doing? Here we go. Symptoms of financial bondage. Number 1, overdue bills. That's a huge symptom of financial bondage. In Ecclesiastes 5:5 it says, "It is better not to make a vow than to make one and not fulfill it." Come on, guys, we know what that means. Because we want something so bad, we'll overextend ourselves, and it really gets in the way. Number 2, feeling anxious. This is another symptom of financial bondage. In Matthew 6:24, it says, "No one can serve two masters, for either he will hate the one and love the other, or else he will be loyal to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve God and mammon." In Luke 12:22, he said to his disciples, "Therefore I say to you, do not worry about your life." In other words, don't have anxiety what you will eat, nor about the body, what you will put on it. Don't be anxious, guys. It wages war between your spirit and your soul. In Luke 12:31, it says what? "Seek his kingdom, and these things will be given to you as well." Not all the things you think you want, but all the spiritual kinds of things that you really, really need to have. Really important that we understand this. Number 3, get rich quick attitude. If you've got a get rich quick attitude, this can be a real problem. Proverbs 28:20 says, "A faithful man will abound with blessings, but he who hastens to be rich will not go unpunished." Listen, guys, there is a plethora of get-rich-quick schemes that are out in our marketplace today. You need to be very, very careful. There's no such things as get-rich-quick, and you need to be careful. Most of those examples that you're looking at, some of the people, yes, they were very, very successful. What you don't know is the amount of energy and time and oftentimes failure that had to be experienced before they got to where they are. So be very careful with the whole get-rich-quick attitude. Number 4, a big one, deceitfulness. Proverbs 20:17, "Bread gained by deceit is sweet to a man, but afterward his mouth will be filled with gravel." I can't tell you how many times I fell into that trap. When I was in the business world, I didn't know God. I would actually lie and cheat in order to get things that I really wanted, and I'm not very proud of that. Deceitfulness is a symptom of being in financial bondage. Number 5 is similar, greediness. In 1 John 2:16, it says, "For all that is in the world, the desires of the flesh and the desires of the eyes and pride of life is not," listen guys, "it's not from the Father, but is from the world." It's very important that you not really go into this whole idea of being greedy. Number 6, covetousness. A big word, okay? Ephesians 5:15, "Nor covetous man who is an idolater has any inheritance in the kingdom of Christ and of God. It's a warning that we should not be covetous. In Ecclesiastes 5:10 it says, whoever loves money never has enough. Whoever loves wealth is never satisfied with their income. This too, Solomon says, is meaningless. He says, as goods increase, so do those who consume them. And what benefit are they to the owners except to feast their eyes on them? Ecclesiastes 5:10-12 also says, the sleep of a laborer is sweet, whether they eat little or much. But as for the rich, their abundance permits them no sleep. So this whole idea of coveting and really desiring, this whole idea of really having to have, can really get in the way. And Solomon realized that, and he talked about it in Ecclesiastes. And then number 7, an overcommitment to work. This is important too. Proverbs 23:4 says, do not overwork to be rich because of your own understanding. Cease. I remember one time, and I was in the business world, and before I came to know the Lord, I would say I lived to work. But there came a time in my life when I began to understand some of these principles, and I changed, guys. I now can honestly say that I work to live. I don't live to work. It's not about the work. It's about, I go to work and I do the things I need to do because it's necessary for me to be able to live a life that is pleasing to the Lord. But you've got to have the proper perspective when you're doing these things, okay? So be careful of an overcommitment to work. That'll really get in the way of a healthy relationship with your wife and your family. Number 8, financial superiority. This can be a problem too. Proverbs 18:11 says this, the wealth of the rich is their fortified city. They imagine it a wall too high to scale. And I remember back in the early days as I was coming up in the business world, I had to have a certain kind of car. Why? Because of what it communicated. It communicated to people that I was wealthy, that I had it together, and I had this financial superiority attitude in my life, and it was a way of communicating that helped with my own insecurity. You need to ask yourself the question, are you the kind of person that has that kind of attitude and that kind of financial superiority going on in your life? Very dangerous. And then number 9 is a failure to give to others. You are in financial bondage, guys, if you have a hard time giving to other people. James 2:15 and 16 says this, if a brother or sister is poorly clothed and lacking in daily food, and one of you says to him, go in peace and be warmed and filled, without giving them the things needed for the body, what good is that? The idea that we've got to be free to give to others. And what does that mean? It doesn't mean always giving money to the guy standing on a street corner, because sometimes they really don't deserve to have our money. But sometimes it could mean that. You need to be discerning about these things. It means, being faithful when you're in a place where you can help others and really bless them, to be free to give. It means giving an appropriate tip when you're in that restaurant. It means sometimes paying for the person in front of you's groceries when it's obvious that they're very poor and the bill came out too much for them to handle, and stepping up and saying, you know what, let me help you with that. That's what I'm talking about. If you find yourself in difficulty doing those things, then I would encourage you to ask some tough questions. Are you in financial bondage because of your failure to freely give to others? And then finally, number 10 is failure to give to God. A failure to give to God is really not a good thing. In Proverbs 3:9 and 10 says, honor the Lord with your wealth and with the first fruits of all your produce. Then your barns will be filled with plenty. Now, I'm not going to get into this whole idea of tithing with you guys because that's been talked about for a very long time, but it's very important that you be free to give to the Lord. Now, Thorsten Veblen says this, the main determinant in the choice and use of material goods is the maintenance of the individual's prestige and self-respect. The person's true needs are, at best, of secondary importance and often are disregarded altogether. To a large extent, a person's prestige in his own eyes, and also in those of his marital partner, neighbors, work associates, and friends, lies mainly in his capacity to demonstrate that he can consume things he really does not need. Does that sound familiar? The gap between a person's true needs and the things he consumes but does not need is one of the basic features of all economic systems. This principle is defined by the term conspicuous consumption. The awesome difficulty in freeing ourselves from conspicuous consumption lies in the fact that we are reared in it from our earliest months. That it is accepted as an unquestioned, desirable aspect of our existence, and that our concepts of ourselves as worthwhile, desirable persons depend to a large extent on how well we play this game. 1 Timothy 6:10 says, "For the love of money is a root of all kinds of evils." Now, again, God wants to free us. In the next session, we're going to talk about keys to financial freedom. But in this session, the life implication is living in financial bondage displeases God and can destroy your family and relationships. So your discussion questions are simple. Let's go over these real quickly. On a scale of 1 to 5, how would you rate yourselves in the area of overdue bills, feeling anxious, the get-rich-quick attitude idea? How are you doing in that area? Are you finding yourself gravitating towards some of those schemes? How about deceitfulness? Do you find yourself kind of bending the truth or being a little bit deceitful when it comes to your dealings financially? Greediness, we talked about that. Covetousness, you know, the whole idea of really wanting sometimes what your neighbor has, and the whole one-upsmanship kind of idea, okay? An overcommitment to work. Do you work to live, or do you live to work? What is your attitude in that area? Are you a snob financially? Do you find yourself putting badges around you of things you own to display some kind of financial superiority? And are you having a hard time giving to others, and are you having a hard time giving to God? You know, someone asked me one time, do you tithe on the gross or do you tithe on the net? And I heard somebody say, well, it depends on whether you want the gross blessing or the net blessing. That's just a cute way of saying, you know, look, guys, it really doesn't matter. The idea is what's in your heart. Is your heart really have the right attitude, and are you in financial bondage? Listen, rate yourself, and until next time, don't forget about it.